I call Dennis O'Rourke.
Mr Speaker, the Social Housing Reform, Housing Restructuring and Tenancy Matters Amendment Bill is just another knee-jerk reaction by the government to the intensifying New Zealand housing crisis. The government's priorities are in saving money and reducing the size of state services, rather than ensuring that the needs of people, especially those at the lower end of the socio-economic spectrum, are adequately met. It will be a darker future for them. And the bill here offered is another one of the government's moves being made in isolation to what is really needed, which is a comprehensive New Zealand housing strategy, in which social housing must have a vital part, not a reduced one. The social housing sector in New Zealand is grossly neglected. In comparison with the United Kingdom and Europe, our sector is primitive and fails to meet the needs and expectations for social housing in this century. And in New South Wales, there is another example of a place where a much more innovative and up-to-date approach is being tried and found. This bill goes in the opposite direction. The expectation that somehow the laying off of social housing to community housing organisations will solve our housing needs is unrealistic and risky. Housing New Zealand as it is also unable to meet these needs adequately. There are too few rental housings, especially in Auckland, but also in Christchurch, where the earthquakes have caused rents to rocket, too few houses to meet the need, and poor quality rental units. There is not adequate support either for state house tenants who need the assistance of other social agencies. We have in some parts of the country effectively state house ghettos with attendant crime problems in some places, but contrasting areas with no such issues in others. This inconsistency and the fact that there are too many state houses in some places and not enough in other places shows that we have had no strategic approach to social housing needs in New Zealand for far too long. We now need new housing models, such as those being established in New South Wales, and more innovation and options for people in the rental market. And this bill doesn't do that properly at all. And we need more experimentation. A good example actually is the competition for a new housing model in central Christchurch currently. It came up with some well-considered mixed housing ideas, which I hope will all be tried. This bill does none of this. Mr Speaker, New Zealand First policy is to make rental housing affordable and accessible to people on the lowest incomes, and to offer a range of options to meet all social needs. The government's social housing problems reduce the scope of the operation of Housing New Zealand, and it will transfer large sums of money to community housing organisations. And this raises many unanswered questions. Most of all, how will the need for a robust regime of accountability be met? The bill before us does not adequately address these issues. And what about the application processes when last year the Salvation Army was turned down for not meeting financial criteria, but part of the $3 million Maori fund was allocated to Whangarei accessible housing, which was running at a loss? Figure that out. What about the competency of third sector housing providers applying for social housing? Grants are given of large sums of money, and these organisations will own the housing funded by the government. How do we know it will be well spent? There will be no state asset in return, and what happens if a recipient organisation fails? Where do the assets go? How transparent and accountable are the processes for allocating funds to community providers? What safeguards and risk management have been put in place for the funds allocated to non-profit community providers? Will well-meaning community providers have enough competence in the housing market when private investors have lost many millions of dollars in the building and property market themselves? Will these organisations have the competencies to maintain and manage assets properly? New Zealand First believes that it is unwise to confuse social objectives with property investment objectives in non-government organisations. The outcome will be risky, uncertain and unlikely to be acceptable in practice. The state is better to provide social housing directly and not rely so much on the NGO sector. There is a place for them, such as those organisations which provide refuges for women in the need of that facility, and there are others too. But these are a discrete and relatively small area of need. The social housing need in New Zealand is now huge and growing, and more Kiwis are unable to afford a home. Many will never be able to buy one. Their need is for options for long-term rental housing, which only the state in this country can reliably provide. Now, the income-related rent subsidies which this bill will provide to community organisations also has too many pitfalls.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair. This debate is interrupted and the House is suspended until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.